What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. All right, all you hackers, today is one of the coolest interviews that I've done to date, and it's with my good friend James Bubba Kroeger. Now, one of the reasons this is so cool is James has had arguably two of the best jobs that you could ever want to have in the golf business. His first one was in Titleist golf ball R&D, where he would really go up and down the East Coast, gather a lot of research on Titleist golf balls with amateurs, club pros, and tour pros, take that back to the engineers at Titleist so that they would know what needed to be modified to optimize a golf ball, be it a dimple depth, a dimple pattern, outer core material, and so on. He was also a club fitter for them, where he got to work with and fit a lot of their top amateur golfers, their top club pros, and some of their touring staff pros at their home facility up in Massachusetts. From there, he went on to become manager of Foot Joy Field Marketing, where he is primarily focused on managing their amateur promotions program, as it's at the same time overseeing Foot Joy's infield fitting and consumer marketing initiatives. Now, that might sound like a lot of big words, and it really comes down to he is the Foot Joy amateur rep, where he goes to a lot of the top amateur golf tournaments and junior tournaments around the country and works with some kids who are really like playing the Foot Joy and Titleist products. So today's interview is packed with a lot of information on golf balls, on club fitting, on amateur golf. And if by the end of this interview you don't think that Bubba is one of the best guys in the game and that he has some of the best jobs in the game, then you might have listened to the wrong interview. So enjoy this episode with James Bubba Kroeger. All right, we're rocking and rolling. I am here with good friend of mine, James Bubba Kroeger. He is the manager of Foot Joy Field and Marketing. Bubba, thank you very much for taking the time and coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess the first question I want to ask that I would assume is running through the minds of some of the listeners. What would your job as manager of field and marketing for Foot Joy? Can you kind of elaborate on what that is in layman's terms?
Sure. So I have two primary responsibilities. The first one is to handle and oversee all of our field marketing program and initiatives, which basically is an experiential program where we have fitters around the country who go do fitting events, support with tournaments, and offer our highest level of service with a fan that's basically fully outfitted with the complete line of FootJoy products. It's like a traveling showroom. And those individuals go around the country making sure we create brand ambassadors with all different types of consumers. And then the second very different aspect of my job, which takes up probably a little bit more of the majority, is I oversee our junior college and mid-am support programs. So identifying the top junior college and mid-ams in the country, providing support, and hopefully finding that next Tiger Woods.
Yeah, absolutely. When you mentioned the Foot Joy, the fitting in the van / trailer, what is it that you guys are fitting for, or is it all conclusive with Foot Joy and Titleist under the Cushnet banner?
No, so it is strictly with FootJoy. It's basically a complete FootJoy initiative. And the number one thing that we're doing is we're trying to educate golfers on the fact that 65% of all golfers are in the wrong size shoe. People don't realize the importance of a properly fit shoe when it comes to their back, knees, and overall golf game. I mean, we want people to look at shoes as much more of a performance piece of equipment than they have in the past. And then in addition, obviously, we fit them for gloves and apparel, which that's much more of a sales and consumer play. But we just want to showcase our whole line with our most knowledgeable representatives and just kind of create that connection with the consumer. But the main focus is making sure we get individuals in the right size shoe.
Absolutely. I'll get into, I want to save kind of the FootJoy stuff for later. So before we get too far down that path, let me back up and kind of the MO of the podcast. And I'd never planned on it this way, but it just seemed to happen as you kind of get into your career in golf and so forth. But let me back up even before I go to there. And I think, my brother and a couple other guys, I think Ben Showman from Puma and Cobra, a couple of guys wanted me to ask you that. How did you get the name Bubba?
Well, I think I told your brother this probably 3 different times, but it's long story short, when I was an infant in Zionsville, Indiana, which is where I was born, I was kind of a crazy little infant, and a lot of the older kids said I reminded them of a character from a movie back in the day, which nobody has probably ever heard of, but his name was Bubba, so they called me Bubba. But it really stuck when my family and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I was the youngest kid on the block, and all the kids called me Bubba, which is kind of an affectionate term for little brother down in the South. And when I mean it stuck like gold, you could ask my parents what my real name is, and it would take them a good minute to remember that it's me. So there's not a single person on the face of this planet that I am close with who calls me James. So,
we met, I don't know how many, 15 years ago, and I had your number in my phone, and I had it as Bubba, and I had to ask my brother, like, wait a minute, what's Bubba's first name?
Well, the funny thing is that, I did used to be a rather large individual, but, subsequently I've lost about 100 pounds. So now I'm the 185-pound Bubba from Buffalo, New York. So it gets a lot of funny looks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did, since this is a golf podcast, how did you get started in golf?
Honestly, it all started back when I was a kid, and I would just go to golf camps during the summer and kind of play with my buddies. And I played baseball and basketball and football growing up, but there was always something about golf that I really liked, and I kind of stuck with that through high school and then college. And so it really started like with most kids, where you just take a class and take a camp, and you just kind of fall in love with the game.
Did you end up playing in college?
So I went to Indiana, and I didn't play in any events, but I did a couple of the walk-on tournaments where I did pretty well and technically earned a practice spot. But unfortunately, my focus in college revolved a little bit more around the sport of drinking. So
You were a plus
my
six
golf game
handicap.
suffered. Yeah, my golf game suffered quite a bit, but I did decide to get serious about it afterwards. And I played on the mini tours, the Hooters Tour, Gateway Tour, Moonlight Tour in Florida for about 3 years between college and my start at Titleist.
Mm-hmm. How'd that go? I mean, did you progress? Or did you obviously you didn't stick with it
I did.
after?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, mini tours is just a different world, and it's so difficult. And I was up in Canada for Canadian Tour Q School. This is back before it was the Mackenzie Tour and a real true avenue to what is now the Corn Ferry Tour. But I was up in Canada for Q School, and I did pretty well, and I got conditional status, maybe 10 events for the year. And I was just sitting there, and I said, God love the people who are willing to do this for a long time, but this is just not what I want to do. And, I also realized that the likelihood of making it all the way to the top was pretty slim to none, just based off of competing against guys who had played at the top. And so I said, I think it's time to get a real career, and I love golf so much. I'm going to do everything I can to get involved with the industry. And that's how Titleist came about.
Did you have anyone, pros or mentors that helped you along the way? I mean, your transition from college to mini tour life, and then
I actually went down to Florida to work with Mike Bender for a while, but I actually started working more with his assistant Ty Kroeger. And while I was down there, Elliot Geely, who was a web.com player, Zach Johnson was actually around a lot. This is before he moved to Sea Island and he lived in Lake Mary. So I played with Zach quite a bit when I was down in Orlando and everything. And, he's really gracious and gave some great advice on what he did moving up because, coming out of Drake, he wasn't much coming out of college. He was in a similar position to myself and a lot of my friends who were trying to make it. And he gave some really good tips and, just playing with him, you got to see how he thinks his way around a golf course, how he prepares, the dedication. And I think that was the number one thing I learned looking back at it, the number one regret I have is I wasn't more organized in my practice. I was diligent. I practiced a lot. I worked very hard, but I wasn't as organized. I didn't have quite as much of a plan as I should have. And I think that was the number one thing I learned from watching him.
What do you mean by plan? Tell us what you did, and then tell us if you could go back, what you would have done different.
Yeah. So, I mean, I did. When I moved down there, I was very much, being a lefty, as most lefties are, very handsy and, try to get away with whatever natural talent that we have. And I worked very hard for the first year and a half, and I struggled quite a bit just overhauling my swing to make it much more consistent. And I got there. So I worked so hard on the swing, I didn't work hard enough on how to actually play the game of golf. Mm-hmm. And that's really what ended up not being my downfall by any means, but because I don't want to make it seem like, I had all this God natural talent that I was definitely going to make it. But I think what really kind of held me back more than anything was not learning how to play the game and how to score. I'd go out there and I'd shoot 69 on a day where I wasn't striking it well, and I'd be more disappointed that I wasn't striking it well. And then I'd have a day where I shot 75, but I was hitting it well. And I thought, well, that was a great round because I was hitting it well. And ultimately, the number one objective for golf is to shoot the lowest score that you can.
Right.
Yep. You're not looking to go out. I mean, nobody's going to be impressed if you go out there and flush every single drive and every single iron and shoot 75. It's more impressive to go out there and find a way to get it in the hole for a lower score. And, seeing how Zach and some of the web.com guys who worked with Mike at the time, the swing was important, but in the end, if it doesn't translate to lower scores, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I saw that a lot out there. Guys finally get to their, let's say, part of their dream or start to living their dream where they're playing at a touring professional level. And then for some reason, they think they've got to change their swing or they got to hit it better. Yeah. They focus so much on that they forget that that they're actually playing golf. And, guys, and this was, it's been 13, 14 years since I played. But, I mean, guys were checking their swing and everything back then. I couldn't imagine what they're doing now.
Oh, my God. I mean, with bringing in TrackMan. I mean, TrackMan sounds like I'm dating myself. I'm not that old, but TrackMan wasn't really around when I was playing. But now, you have TrackMan and everybody's got that set up. And I think there's a benefit to tools like that. I think really more than anything, it helps really dial in yardages. But when you start playing swing instead of golf, you kind of lose the whole point of it. You lose the whole objective, which again is to just shoot the lowest score.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the other thing, too, is you can sit on a driving range and bank 7-irons from a perfectly flat lie and a good lie for hours. And then the second you go out there and play your first hole, you may have a 9-iron from the side hill lie in the rough, and how do you hit that shot? So it's practice is great. But, Jerry Haas told me a great story about Webb Simpson. And he was practicing. They were practicing at school. And Webb was out there, and he's on the range, and Webb's kind of hitting some squirrely shots. And Jerry kind of walks up to him. He's like, "Do you need anything?" And he goes, "No, I'm just going to go play." And he went out there and played that day and shot 63. And he said that the best players that he's ever had just played golf. They weren't range rats.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a pretty common theme amongst some of the better players that I see today. And that you probably see in history, whether it's Tiger or Rory or those guys, they're not really range rats. Tiger's a range rat when he's actually trying to change something. But if you listen to him talk about his game, really, he cares about getting out there and actually playing, because there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, and at that level, what most people don't realize is that those guys are, with the travel and the demands on their time and everything else, that they're looking to conserve energy, not expend it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And I would have to imagine that's at the amateur level too. When through the summer they're playing a full schedule.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And what I'm really excited about is the fact that I've talked with a lot of the guys I take care of, and a lot of them said the same thing, that they're starting to scale back their summer schedule, because in the end, they have a responsibility to be as ready as they possibly can be for their schools, because their schools are the ones giving them these scholarships. And, during the summer, they'll play in a few events to keep their game sharp, obviously the big ones like the Western and the U.S., but the days of playing in 8-9 events over the summer is pretty much gone, because you're done by the time you get to school.
Oh, I remember like it was yesterday. Over a course of 6 weeks, I played 9 tournaments. You wake up and look at the ceiling, and you don't have no idea what city you're in.
Exactly. That you're just tired, and then after a while, you just don't want to play.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But no, I think that's a big part of it as well now, and learning to conserve energy and stuff. And but yeah, that all is stuff that you learn as you play more. And the other thing too is that when you're 20, you can play 30 rounds, in a month, and then when you're 35, as you and I know, it becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, 30 rounds a year.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd be thrilled with 30 rounds a year. So. But yeah, it was a great experience being on the mini tours and getting to meet some fantastic people. And, just saying I was able to do it was probably the biggest thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any regrets. I learned a lot and gained a lot of experience, but I will say I never missed it when I left. So,
well, then you made the right decision.
Yes, exactly. I have a funny story about mini tours. I'm sure you've had plenty as well. But I was at a Hooters tour event in South Bend, Indiana. I was playing a practice round. I was playing with this guy, nice guy. I don't even remember his name. Maybe 40 years old, and he's on the phone for the first 16 holes. And finally, on 17, I just said, hey, I hope I'm not intruding, but is everything okay? You've been on the phone this whole time. He's like, yeah, I'm going through a divorce right now. I said, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. He goes, no, my ex-wife just doesn't get it. And I said, well, what's that? And he goes, this is my dream. And I go, yeah, I can imagine. I go, have you made it to the tour? And he goes, no, I played in one at the time Nike tour event. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're 40 years old and you've played in one Nike tour event and that's the pinnacle of what you reach, I think your wife may have the right idea. So, yeah, I never wanted to be that. So, more power to you for chasing your dream. But let's put it like this. I don't know his name because subsequently I don't think he's made it. So, but yeah, so it's tough. It's a tough grind, but you do get to learn a lot for sure.
So you play the tours, many tours, and then you get done, and then where do you go from there? Was that when you got the job with Titleist?
Yeah, so I did take, it was about 3 months. I had an interview for customer service in Titleist right after I stopped playing, and I moved back to Buffalo for about 3 months to get my bearings straight. And I went in for the interview for customer service, and while I was there, they said, hey, we'd like you to talk to this individual, Karen Gray, who oversees our fitting program at Manchester Lane. And for those people who don't know, Manchester Lane is basically our East Coast TPI Oceanside Fitting Center. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to meet her. I met her. We had a great conversation. And about a week later, I get a call from our HR director, and he said, hey, we all agree you are just not meant for customer service. And I was like, oh, great, that's nice to hear. But he follows it up with, we think you'd be a great candidate for this open position at our fitting center. And the reason why they said I wasn't great for customer service is, I'm like a bull in a china shop. Sitting behind a desk answering phones for 9 hours wasn't exactly something I could handle. So I go back in for a second interview with Karen for this fitting center, and I just fell in love with the idea of the position. And, I was fortunate enough to earn it. And then I moved to Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and that was the start of it.
What was so you were fitting mostly golf balls or golf clubs or combination of both?
So we technically, the department I worked in when I was at Manchester Lane was golf ball R&D, but the major responsibility of the job was club fitting at our test facility, and then as well we did a lot of ball testing. Of course, we always fit for balls, but a big portion of what we did was ball testing, and we did a lot with launch monitors, both TrackMan and our Titleist performance monitor. Mm-hmm. We tested consumers, PGA Tour players, college players, everybody, the whole gambit. And so that was, like I said, the vast majority of the responsibilities was club fitting, but ball testing and was a significant portion of it as well.
Did you like one more than the other?
I think club fitting was more engaging because you got to know the consumer, you got to know the player. I mean, we fit Brad Faxon and Billy Andrade and all the local guys and, the tour players when they were out for the Boston event. So there was more that went into club fitting, but the ball testing was fascinating because we got to see the engineers take the information we gather and make all the different types of golf balls that they wanted to test based off of that information. So I'd say on a day in and day out basis, the club fitting was more engaging, but I think there was more of a sense of accomplishment with the ball testing.
So take us through what would have been a normal day if there is such a thing.
Yeah. Well, when we were actually in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and for those people who don't know, Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and this is from a guy who was raised in Buffalo, New York, Fairhaven, Massachusetts has some of the toughest weather you could ever imagine. So our season at Manchester Lane was pretty much mid-May to early October, and that was about it. The rest of the time we were on the road doing ball testing. But when we were actually at Manchester, we would do a fitting in the morning around 9:30, go in, set up, and do a fitting in the morning around 9, which lasted about 3 hours. It takes about 3 hours to do a full head-to-toe fitting. And then, the staff would clean up. We'd go out to lunch and come back and then do another fitting in the afternoon from about 1 to 4. And it was myself and Alex Stimson, who's a good friend of mine who I worked with for 6.5 years there. And we did, each of us would have a guy or a woman and fit them morning, afternoon, and pretty much do that every weekday.
So you did wedges, irons, and woods?
We did everything. Yeah, we did everything but putters. Putters was basically the only thing we didn't do because we highly recommended that if people got fit for putters, they would go out to either, at the time, the Scotty Cameron studio. And that was something pretty much handled on the West Coast. But we did wedges, irons, fairway wood, hybrid drivers. We did ball. Of course, we certainly ball fit because you can always have to fit for the ball, especially being a Titleist. And we did everything. I mean, you name it, we fit head to toe, and there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
What were some of the things that would go into it? Like, obviously you learned a lot, but what were some of the things that you went into it thinking you knew that you didn't, you found out you didn't, and that you learned as you moved on from there?
Yeah. So, I mean, boy, I don't even know where to start. There's so many things I learned that I still carry over to this day when people ask me about clubs. I mean, for instance, the driver, people, I feel like the driver is something that you really want to use a launch monitor to gauge, to get somebody dialed in with the driver. But the number one thing I learned is that after you do that, you got to take it out to the course, and you got to hit that driver around the course. And, it's one thing to have 11 launch 2,400 spin and think that that's perfect. But with that driver, are you able to hit that high spinning cut to keep it in play if not everything's going right? Or are you able to turn it over if you're obsessed with taking the right, the left out of play? Are you able to turn it over with control? So with the driver, as much as the launch monitor is important, you got to be able to take it out to the course. For 3-woods, the number one thing I learned that I say to this day is 3-woods are just too darn long nowadays. I mean, people play 43 inches and they have no sense of where the club head is. It's just too long for the vast majority of golfers. So I tell every golfer right off the bat, go at least half an inch short for the most part. Now, that's not, it ends up not working for everybody, but I would say 90% of even our top golfers, college golfers, PGA Tour players, play a fairway wood that's a little bit shorter if they're looking for a control club. I'm 6'3". This is a great example here. I'm 6'3", and I play a 3-wood that's 3/4 of an inch short. Mm-hmm. And I hit it better than I could ever imagine hitting a standard leg 3-wood. And, so many consumers come in thinking, oh, I'm 6'4" with 47-inch arms. And I'm just throwing that out there. I don't even know if that's realistic. And so I need plus a half an inch. And it's like, well, no, because with a club, if I measure you statically, just standing over the golf ball, you may find that you need plus an inch or plus half an inch. But as you know better than anything with club fitting, it's all about dynamic positions. What's your position at impact? What's your club head doing at impact? That's the most important thing. And that's what we really try to stress to a lot of golfers. And then, as you get down to the irons, once you get past the driver, the need for a launch monitor to fit becomes less significant, in my opinion. So a 3-wood, okay, yeah, you can use a launch monitor to get an idea. It's maybe important to hit a yardage. Hybrid, then it becomes really important about hitting a yardage. Iron, it becomes important to hit a yardage and see a flight, the window. Where do you want to see that ball after you hit it? And then wedges, again, it's just yardage. So after the driver, using a launch monitor for launch conditions almost becomes a little bit more of an inhibitor, I think. Especially the better the player that you are. And you really just want to hit numbers as far as distances and see the proper flight. And then with wedges, obviously, bounce and all that stuff really comes into play.
Yeah, I've seen too many people who've I always call it, and don't get me wrong, I think TrackMan flights go, I think they're all phenomenal devices to be used, right? But I've seen them used very often in the wrong way, in like you say, and I call it painting by numbers. Yep. The Mona Lisa would never have been painted by a number.
Yeah.
So if somebody's going to fit, let's say they're overusing a launch monitor, and someone spins a little too high, but they have they don't have a lot of lag in their swing, like a Steve Stricker.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, okay, we're going to put you in a really firm tip shaft. Okay, well, that goes completely contrary to their release pattern. So now you've got a player who's playing a shaft in their club that doesn't match their release pattern, but the numbers match, and then they go out in the course and they're like, this doesn't ever feel right. I can't score the way I want to. I work my butt off, and it's like, okay, and no one can ever figure it out. It's like, okay, you got the profile of the shaft wrong. It's real simple. Well, the number's right, okay, but his scores aren't.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's. You hit it right on the head. It's, okay, the numbers are great. Well, this gets back to our earlier conversation about playing swing versus playing golf. Like you said, are you painting by numbers? I mean, are you playing numbers golf or are you playing score golf? And, you go out on tour and, yeah, there's an average of what the guys hit as far as launch and spin for the different irons. And I think there's a fairly good rule of thumb that if you take anywhere from 14 to 16 degrees of launch, and 6,000 spin for your 6-iron, and then you add 2 degrees of launch and 1,000 RPM for every club going down, 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron, and then vice versa for every club going up. That's a decent average to maybe try to achieve and gives you at least some framework to work with. But, you know, you have to be able to see the window, the shot that you like, feel the club a certain way, you know, I mean, that's all extremely important. I think sometimes people get a little bit lost in the whole, oh, well, I didn't achieve my numbers, you know, and it's, hey, it's about playing golf, not about just spitting for golf.
Yeah, they start splitting hairs, and you can go down a very dark road if you start doing that in this game.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing, too, is that when you start talking launch and spin, you're also assuming you're hitting it the same way every single time. And as we all know, there's maybe a handful of people on the face of this planet that you could probably feel comfortable enough saying you hit the ball at least very consistent on every single shot to have a good idea that numbers, you know, really mean something. So, you know, I think for the better player, I think it's important for the consumers too, you know, even a 9 handicap to not just get so bogged down in the numbers.
So how the ball testing or the ball fitting had to be somewhat easier because it's been 5 years since so you started at about 12 years ago. Would you work? You did that about 6 years, I think you said.
Yeah, so I started with the company 11 years ago, and I was at Manchester for about 6.5 years. And when it comes, we have a saying in Titleist, and we have it internally, we say it externally, that the 3 most important factors to determining the success of a golfer or scores is the club, the ball, and the golfer, right? But we actually say GCB in importance. The golfer is always the most important factor in how a shot is struck, right? No matter what, the golfer is the most important factor. If you put a good swing on it, if they know what they're doing, that's going to affect the golf ball flight more than anything. Second is clubs, right? A properly fit golf ball can't compensate for properly fit clubs.
No, it's that old earrings on a pig saying.
Exactly. And then when we get to the ball, we say the ball is by no means the least important, but it's the least influential of what of all of the equipment and all the factors that produces a certain shot. But the thing that's also most important to realize is that the ball is the only piece of equipment you use on every single shot. So while it's the least influential factor, it's also the one thing that you use on every single shot. So you never want to neglect the ball. So when we were done, we would always fit the clubs with the ball that the player said that they used, whether it's Pro V1, Pro V1 NX, Pro V1 X, at the time MXT Tour. Hell, it could have been a Pinnacle for all we cared. We would have fit you with a Pinnacle if that's what you played. And then based off of what we saw in your game, once we know we had you dialed in with clubs, we would then make a recommendation on the ball.
So the most asked question I get about golf balls is from most people, and this would stretch from, let's say, your average everyday golfer, 18 handicap, all the way up to some of the better players I work with when all the balls come out and they're like, you know, which one do I use if I'm going to switch and all this other stuff. But the most, you know, how do people find the right ball?
You know, we always like to say, and I do agree with this, you start at the green and move backwards.
That's what I always told people.
And you want to find that ball that gives you the most control with the short game and the wedge shots, because again, that's the vast majority of the shots that any person's going to hit, especially an 18 handicap. You know, but again, that doesn't always mean that you need the highest spinning ball. You know, some individuals actually benefit from a lower spinning ball, even if it's not urethane, like a Sterling cover, because too much spin leads to directional issues and also leads to too much spin going into the greens. But you always want to fit around the greens and then work backwards. Go to the irons, then the fairway woods, and then ultimately the driver. And so that's a good rule of thumb to start with. But you want to look for a multitude of factors. You want to look for spin. You want to look for feel. You want to see which ball, you know, you have the most control with, which ball gives you the flight that you like to see. And then ultimately, when you get back down to the driver, if all things, let's say you have a ball that stands out significantly at the short game and the irons, but maybe a hair shorter with the driver, then you got to go with the ball that gives you more control with the irons and the short game. But if you get back to the driver and say, man, the difference between these two golf balls. Let's say a guy is significantly better with the Pro V1, short game, iron game, and hybrids, let's say. And then they get to the driver, and the X is significantly better based off of launch conditions or speed or whatever it may be. We always tell the person, well, then you got to look at your driver. Let's fit the driver to what we know works best ball-wise, fairway to green. And I think that's a good rule of thumb and a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people that you, like you just said, from the greenback and the irons, because you're hitting your irons for the average golfer about 3 times more than they're going to hit their driver.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you said, you can tweak the driver, especially in today's adjustable headed world.
Oh, yeah.
You can move weight here and move weight there and modify the shaft a little bit, and then next thing you know, that ball that they like, that gap is shortened from the ball that really performed well off the driver.
Exactly. So, I think that's, very important to consider. We feel very strongly, and this is not just a marketing campaign or advertising campaign, that Pro V1, Pro V1X, and now AVX, the vast, vast majority of golfers amongst those 3 balls will find the best ball for them. But there is a segment of golfers that actually play better and would benefit from a Sterling ball. And that's usually a result of needing less spin. If you have an individual who, let's say, is a 12, 13 handicap, who does have some semblance of speed, tends to get steep on it and hits it all over the face of the planet, you want less spin. Less spin equals less curve. Mm-hmm. And so those individuals do benefit from a more Sterling covered ball. But like I said, I mean, the vast majority of golfers between AVX, Pro V1, and Pro V1X are going to find a golf ball that works best for them.
Yeah. Did you see the My Golf Spy ball study?
I did.
You did or didn't?
I did. Yeah.
That was pretty impressive, I thought.
It was quite verbose, but I did see it. So.
Yeah. Thoughts, good or bad? Did you like what they said? I mean, you're an expert in that field. I mean, what did you think about their study?
The one thing I'll say is that they do a thorough job, which I respect. Again, like I said, I didn't read every single word. I think they do a thorough job. I think sometimes they have connections with certain companies that lead to certain conclusions, if you know what I'm saying. But the one thing I will say about My Golf Spy that I do respect is the fact that they are thorough. And they do, but they also do, again, it gets back to it. Think about how many numbers they talked about, with the golf ball. And boy, you want to talk about a dangerous road with talking numbers with a golf ball. I mean, we would have robots at Manchester Lane for testing of golf balls. And these are robots that are set up to swing identical on every shot. And from golf ball to golf ball, the same exact golf ball, whatever the reason, you could see variances of 200, 300 RPM of spin, in a 7-iron, in a 5-iron, sometimes even in a driver. And if you ask any engineer at Titleist, a lot of times they consider 200 RPM of spin noise, just
yeah, that's just the variance
within the shot, And so to get so wrapped up in a couple hundred RPM of spin almost creates some paralysis by analysis. What did you think of it?
Well, I wanted to ask you that their overall conclusion, or at least from what I took of it, that's the feeling of a softball, if you was not good, that a lot of golfers probably, I think they were geared more towards the average golfer, that a firmer ball is much better, and that this old idea that soft is not good because they're going to cough up. I think they had somewhere in their 85-mile-an-hour swing, somewhere around a 10 or 15, I could be wrong, but somewhere in that direction, yard difference in a driver.
Yeah, and I think the tough part about that, too, is that, if you look at swing speed and just swing speed, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies now say, this ball is great for your swing speed. Okay, well, what's the definition of swing speed with the driver? Okay, well, if I have a 90-mile-per-hour clubhead speed with my driver, resulting in 135 miles per hour ball speed. We only pretty much deal with ball speed because ball speed takes into account clubhead speed and how well you hit it. But if you have a driver or a guy that's driving at 90 miles per hour clubhead speed. Okay, well, this ball is great for you at 90 miles per hour. Well, what about your 7-iron, which might be at 78 miles per hour? What about your wedge, which might be at 65 miles per hour? So it's not just about that driver swing speed and just swing speed in general. And when it comes to softer balls, the other thing about softballs is typically in order to get a softer ball, you have lower compression, right?
Right.
But soft is not a function of feel. It's actually a function of sound. So a ball only feels softer because it sounds softer. Believe it or not, the hardness is actually very similar to a harder golf ball. It's sound that we associate with feel. So we did a study in R&D once where we had individuals hit with noise-canceling headphones and tell us what the ball was, if it was hard or firm or if it was hard or soft. And there was absolutely zero correlation or ability to tell a hard golf ball, higher compression, and a soft ball, lower compression.
Yeah, we did that one time. I mean, as much as we bought a couple dozen balls, all different feels, so to speak. And we went out and put earplugs in and hit them, and you couldn't tell the difference.
No, you can't. You absolutely can't. The other thing, too, is that you got to look at is, when my golf spy says, okay, we noticed that the softer golf ball goes, or I'm sorry, the harder golf ball, let's say, because I think they did say that the harder golf ball on average went a little bit further, correct? So let's look at this. If you have a softer or hard golf ball, well, tell me more about the golf ball, right? If it's a hard golf ball, the compression's higher. Typically, with a higher compression, you're going to get more ball speed. So right off the bat, right there, you're going to have a faster golf ball. Number two, tell me about the dimple pattern, right? So you have a Pro V1X, which has a shallower dimple pattern, which might fly higher, harder compression compared to a Pro V1, which has a deeper dimple pattern, which is going to fly lower. What's typically going to go farther for a guy who has 90 miles per hour clubhead speed? A ball that offers more speed with a higher launch, or a ball that has a little bit less speed with a lower launch?
Right.
So there's so many factors that go into a golf ball other than just simply soft or hard. And I think that's where reading those reports is good to give you some idea, but I would never tell a person to buy it based off of what they read. You got to go out and try it. You got to see it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if you narrowed down around, like we said, around the greens at the irons to about 2 to 3 balls. Let's say someone got it down to 2, and then I tell them the next step is, okay, go hit those balls with your driver, and if you're still caught in between, then they're similar around the greens and with the irons, then pick the one that goes the longest. Right?
Yeah.
Because you might as well get the feel around the green and the distance off the tee. You might as well get both if you're stuck.
Absolutely. All things being equal, if you have a ball that's just as good around, 2 balls that are just as good into and around the greens, definitely pick the ball that's longer.
Right. Even if it feels, even if it has that so-called feel of being harder, okay, pick it anyway. You're going to hit straight or you're going to hit it longer.
Exactly. You can get past feel if you start hitting it longer and straighter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, there's a whole multitude of factors. I think I get why a lot of companies nowadays try to make it simple because that's easier for people. I mean, not a lot of people have the time to just go out and dick around for 9 holes and figure out what ball is best for them. I mean, a lot of people nowadays want to take advantage of every round that they get to play. But if you really want to find what ball is best for you, you just got to go out and try them.
Do balls today well, let me ask you this question first. What's the difference between the layers? Like some have 3, some have 4, some even have 5 layers of balls. So what's the importance or the significance of that?
It really is it all comes down to just performance. So for instance, Pro V1X is 4 layers, a dual core center, Pro V1, 3 layers, solid core center. It really just helps to create characteristics. So because the ball has 5 layers. Hell, you could have a ball have 12 layers. And it doesn't mean it's a better golf ball. It just creates different characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the best way to describe it. So, what's more important is obviously things like compression and dimple pattern and dimple design to determining what ball is best for you. But when it comes to layers, honestly, the layers are just there to achieve certain characteristics in play.
What would be a couple of characteristics? Trajectory, spin?
Yeah, first initial launch. Peak height is extremely important. Peak height is not only a function of spin, but also launch angle and dimple patterns. And then, ability to compress the golf ball. The thinner outer layer, you're going to have more likelihood to get into the core, creating more spin. So there's a multitude of factors that go into it. But yeah, those are characteristics are typically launch, spin, peak height. Those are the big ones.
Do today's balls, the solid core balls, have compression like the old wound balls did?
Can solid core balls have the same compression?
Well, no. Do they have compression? And then how? If so, how did the compression? Because a lot of people might relate that to the old wound balls. Now they had compression, but I'm assuming that the compression of a solid core ball versus the old balls is a lot different. Or am I wrong?
Actually, believe it or not, they're actually. So if you remember, I like to equate it. Remember the old professional 90s and professional 100s?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially a Pro V1 and Pro V1X today. A Pro V1 has a compression of, now, don't quote me because I haven't been in R&D in so long, but, around 90, 91, and then you get into the X, which has, 100 to 106. So compression hasn't changed all that much. But again, getting back to the feel, because a Bellata is a significantly softer cover, with the professionals being wound balls and not solid core balls, the feel might have been different. But compressions, for the most part, on the tour level balls are fairly similar to what they were back in the wound ball days.
How do you get I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you could get some balls nowadays on the market that have 60 compression, that are significantly lower. But yeah, for the most part, the tour balls are around that range of high 80s to low 105s, 110s.
I always had the question in my head, how do you get compression out of a solid core?
How do you compress the core?
Well, no, if it's, let's say it's the compression on a, what'd you say, a Pro V1X was about 106. If it's got a solid core center, how do you get it? And basically you have the inside of the ball and then the cover, right? Is what today's solid core balls are. How do you?
Yeah, you got the core, the mantle, the third layer, and then typically the outer layer.
Okay, so if the core is solid, it's one piece. There's no rubber bands. There's no liquid filled center anymore. How do they do that compression?
Well, you mean how do they find it out, or how does a golfer actually compress it?
How do they find it out?
There's machines that you basically use that test the compression of not only the core but the overall golf ball. It's almost like it's almost like a vice that puts the ball into a machine, and then another instrument comes down and almost exactly does what it sounds like. It compresses the golf ball and then gauges it based off of a certain metric. So it's a standardized unit of measurement. Compression is a standardized measurement amongst all companies. It's not like it's a variable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually a machine that they test compression.
So weren't the old balls, when they were wound with the rubber bands, weren't they wound at a certain tightness that determined the compression?
Yes, 100%.
So how do they make the solid core? Do they just put the material in and then
the materials
squeeze it to a certain level?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The materials that they use, the tightness of which it's constructed, all different factors, but primarily, yes, the materials and how it's actually formed.
That's some pretty cool stuff. Way over my head.
Yeah, we tell people all the time the most fascinating tour you could ever take in a cushion company is walking around our ball plant. You'll never, and I'm not trying to do this as a sales pitch, you'll never want to play another golf ball again. If you see the production quality and attention to detail in our production plants, which are based in Massachusetts, you'll never want to play another golf ball again. But it is just fascinating to see a golf ball go from this little piece of rubber to this finished product. And when you think about a golf ball being able to withstand the impact and the trauma that a golfer puts on it, and really when you think about today's golf ball, the minimal damage that you see for the most part, it really is, without using hyperbole, kind of a technological marvel almost.
Yeah, because the old balls, I mean, the Bellotta area, you cut that if you just hit it a hair thin, and
oh yeah,
you hit a cart path and it's ruined. But today's balls, God, they seem to last forever.
Shit, you'd see them explode. The old ones sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
if you get the long ball and the rubber bands all of a sudden just decide to give way, I mean, those balls could explode. I mean, a big thing of what we did ball testing wise was shear testing. I mean, that was a huge part of our job, was to test the durability of the golf balls.
How much shearing, you mean abrasions and say cart path marks or tree marks, if it hits a tree or cart path?
Yeah, to be completely honest with you, when it comes to cart paths or outside factors, we certainly don't want to see a golf ball get destroyed if it hits a tree once or if it hits a cart path once. But we also consider those, we don't use this word, but almost like an act of God. Like if a ball gets destroyed because it nails a car path or hits a tree at a high speed, that's almost something we can't foresee. Mm-hmm. For us, when we talk about shear or durability, it's really more club impact. Whether it's with a wedge, a driver, that's really our main focus with durability and ability to withstand shots.
How much does the abrasion from, let's say, new grooves on your wedges, or if it does hit a path and it gets that burn mark on it, how much does that affect the playability?
That's a question I get a ton actually. And the number one way to look at it is that if it looks like the paint was affected, you're good. Paint for the most part is cosmetic. If it looks like the cover was damaged at all, you got to switch out the ball. So if it's scraped, if the cover looks scraped, the other thing too, for instance, is like tree sap. Have you ever hit like a tree really hard and you notice you got some of the sap on there? I'd get that ball out of there right away. Because something as small as a little bit of tree sap on one side of the golf ball is going to affect the center of gravity and cause it to fly a certain way.
Jeez, I knew there was a reason.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, every time I hit a tree, I'm like, all right, I'm out.
Hit the next shot and say, Jesus, it's all that tree sap on it.
Exactly. A good rule of thumb is if it's paint damage, you're good. If it's anything associated with the cover or a foreign material stuck to it, I'd switch it out. Because, it's the old adage of like a mud ball. If you have mud on one side of the ball, it's going to fly the other way. So I think that's a good rule of thumb. But like I said, paint, you're good. If it's just a little paint coming off, you're okay.
What about balls that people fish out of a pond?
No, God. Yeah, don't play them.
Just waterlogged?
Yeah, waterlogged, because no matter what, a ball is porous. Now, the current balls are not nearly as porous as the old balls, but it's gonna get waterlogged. It affects the chemical integrity of the golf ball. You just don't know how long the ball's been in there. That's the other thing too. You could fish out a golf ball that's been in there for 3 hours and it's fine. If you fish out a golf ball that's been in there for 7 days, that's another issue. But I tell people all the time, as fun as it is and as great as it is to stand by a lake and fish out 10 Pro V1s, you're not doing yourself a favor playing the best golf ball.
Yeah, it might be good for just knocking around, but you're not going to win.
Yeah. If you want to chip around or something, that's fine, but I would never play with it. No. Now, we also like the fact that we tell people, hey, get a new golf ball. But if we really want to be honest about how it affects your game, it does affect the golf ball quite significantly.
Cool. What do you think of all these direct-to-consumer brands like Vice and Snell and a couple of the other ones I can't even think of them off the top of my head?
I think the big thing with a lot of these golf companies now, and a lot of people, a lot of companies make quality products. Stuff that is good. But when it comes down to us versus our competitors, Titleist versus our competitors, when you see, and it sounds like I'm preaching from the mountaintop, but when you see the quality control and knowing that every golf ball that Titleist manufactures is made at a facility that is owned, solely operated by Titleist as opposed to sent out to a third party, you just know that the quality control is there. And it's just far, far superior. And quite frankly, you're paying for it. But if golf is that important to you, that's what you should do.
Then
You
it's an
should pay for the
investment.
best.
You're at right.
You know what I mean? You should pay for the best. And, like I said, it's obviously I'm biased, having worked for Titleist and Foot Joy for 11 years and stuff. But, if I want to be completely honest, I as a golfer, I always tell people all the time, I said, if I were to ever leave a Cushnet company, there is no way after seeing what I've seen that I could play another golf ball besides Titleist. Now, I'm also fortunate enough that I get golf balls for free. So for consumers that don't who have to pay for golf balls, I understand the allure of paying maybe a little bit less for a dozen golf balls. But I ask golfers this all the time. If you were to say, hey, you're going to play a golf ball that is truly going to help you, not necessarily shoot lower scores. It is impossible for me to go to a 9 handicap and say you will 100% shoot lower scores. But what I can do in all confidence is tell a golfer, I guarantee you that a Titleist golf ball is going to give you the potential to play your best because I know it's the best. I know it's the highest quality. Is that worth $9 to you? And when you frame it like that, you realize, there's something to it. There's something to that. And like I said, that's not knocking the product of other companies. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but in the end, we've been number one for 60 some odd years for a reason. And I truly believe that's because of the product.
Yeah, I mean, the ball count, the guys in the tour, I mean, you guys win the ball count by exponentially.
Oh, yeah.
Huge
Well,
numbers.
and even if you look at, in pros, and people say this a lot, they say, oh, well, pros are paid to play it. So that's why. Well, look at the amount of PGA Tour players that we don't pay to play our golf ball, when they have a choice. Or even better yet, look at the amateurs, the counts at the NCAA or the counts at the USAM, the people who aren't paid to play our golf ball. Look at those counts. And that's where you really see, wow, when people have a choice, there's really no choice.
What did you know? Like, so the story of the Pro V1, was that the scientific name before? Was it going to have a different name? And then Ernie, goes ahead and wins everything with it, and the K driver, and all, he says the Pro V, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I guess that's going to be the name. Or
yeah. So internally, it was called the Pro Veneer. And like you said, people just to shorten it up said Pro V, and it's stuck like glue, and it's probably now become, you could argue, probably the most impactful and noticeable brand in all of golf history almost. So yeah. So it was internally called the Pro Veneer, and then just to shorten it up, it became the Pro V.
How was it that he picked up so much yardage? I mean, he was bombing it by other guys in the tour that aren't short, long hitters, and he's not going to buy him 25, 30, 40 yards.
Well, and we had discussed this earlier, and obviously the ball is a big factor and the driver is a big factor, but what a lot of people don't know is that when Ernie came out and did that at Kapalua out of nowhere, is that he was one of the first players to actually adopt using a launch monitor in fittings and learning the importance of high launch, low spin versus low launch, high spin. And as you know, being around the game, and I've seen countless times with fitting, is that if you get an individual who has 170 ball speed, two individuals 170 ball speed, and one has 8 launch 3,700 spin and another has 12.5 launch 2,400 spin, the guy with the proper launch conditions is going to easily hit it by that other individual 35 to 40 yards. And so I think a lot of people, it was a perfect storm of a great driver in the 975. I think he actually had the 983K that year,
Yeah, he
if I'm
did.
not mistaken.
Yep.
Um, and then a Pro V1, which was a fantastic solid core golf ball to come out. It wasn't a wound ball. But then as well, getting fit with the launch monitor, those three things combined, I mean, just shot him right up, and just he was bombing it by everybody. It was a joke.
Are the rumors that when Tiger first came out that he was that Titleist had him in a prototypical Pro V when everyone else was playing Bellatas and
We
professionals?
That he was playing one?
Right. Or is
No,
that
so
just rumor?
he actually was playing a wound ball in Titleist until he did officially switch over to Nike and have a solid core. Now, I will say that Titleist had a solid core ball ready to rock and roll before we actually debuted the Pro V1. But when he was with Titleist, he was playing a wound ball. He was in the professional 100, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yep. But we've had a Pro V1 for a long time. And then it debuted in Vegas, and it was just,
it took off. I remember that.
Yeah, the rest is history. Yeah. So it's there was an interesting article about Tiger about the solid core Nike golf ball that he used at the Open in 2000, or 2000, 2000 at Pebble, and about how that was the first time he had switched, and it was a very good ball for him, but it just didn't quite take off the way they were hoping.
Well, yeah, I read that article, and they didn't have the at the time. They were more or less upstart in golf.
Yep.
And they didn't have the production ready, and they were waiting to put that into place, and then you guys came out with the Pro V in the fall when they were supposed to come out, and then it killed them.
Yep, and I can tell you, having seen the product life cycle of a golf ball, that in no way, shape, or form was the Pro V1 a response to what Nike did. We had that ready to rock and roll. That thing was ready to go. It was not, hey, we better get serious about making a solid core golf ball. We came up with it in 3 months.
Right.
I'd say it takes a good 4 years to go from concept to market for a golf ball. Yeah. So that thing was ready to rock and roll.
Anything that you know of that they're working on now that's going to be the next biggest and best thing that you're allowed to say?
Yeah, well, the thing with golf balls nowadays is that because of the USGA and the limits that they put on the golf ball, you can't get a golf ball faster. You just can't. It's illegal, quite frankly. What you can always do with a golf ball is always focus on durability, and number two is really focus on characteristics. Making it higher launch, making it lower spin, giving it characteristics that'll help an individual hit it further. Because the one thing that they can never govern is flight patterns, whether it's dimple depth or compression or whatever that may be. So they're always looking to kind of find that edge to just get that ball to perform that much better. And I can tell you the number one focus for them is always durability and then characteristics of flight. Getting that ball so that you just maximize everything that you can get out of a certain ball speed.
Is it the characteristics of the ball are set by the USGA, meaning the weight and the diameter and
Yeah, so weight and diameter is a different factor. Those are set by the USGA, but dimple depth. So for instance, if you have a dimple that's, we're talking the width of a couple hairs, that literally affects peak height by feet,
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a dimple that's shallower, it's going to fly higher, and vice versa, deeper, it's going to fly lower. And I think the one great thing they did with the Pro V1 and Pro V1X is change the flights where they're so different in flight that you really help multiple golfers. They're not so close anymore where there's not as much of a difference. Now the Pro V1X is actually a higher flying ball than the Pro V1 and a little bit higher spinning. But because of the higher compression, it has, a different feel and maybe a hair more speed. But that doesn't necessarily mean it goes further, because that gets back to the importance of golf ball fitting, is that, for Pro V1, there's a lot of golfers out there, some of the best college players and tour players we work with, the Pro V1 goes significantly further.
Yeah, you got me into the.
And that's all about maximizing the characteristics of spin and flight.
Yep.
So yes, USGA does mandate speed, weight, and diameter, obviously. But when it comes to characteristics as far as spin and launch and everything, those are areas where you can really just try to find a way to make it longer or better.
You
And the other thing too is making as consistent of a dimple pattern as possible so that it flies consistently both in the wind and no wind.
When I was getting ready for this, I was talking to my dad real quick about balls, and I said, "You want me to ask Bubba anything?" And he said, "What was that old English ball that
Oh
I had
yeah,
the Robin Hood?"
what was it?
I hadn't called. They were the ones I had were Robin Hoods, and they were slightly smaller than the American ball.
Yeah, and there was another one that James Bond made famous in his movies. And I wish I could. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of it.
Supposedly they went longer, but so why doesn't anyone make a smaller golf ball, or is it now regulation?
USGA doesn't allow it.
Okay.
Yeah, so diameter is determined by the USGA. So yeah, one of these days we'll be able to make, a pea-sized golf ball that goes 600 yards. But yeah, that is determined by the USGA. So I wish I could remember the name of the ball that he used, and it's killing me. Oh, Penfold. That was it. Penfold golf balls were always a little bit smaller. But yeah, the USGA has mandated that they be a certain size now and weight.
All right, let's go back to Foot Joy because that's what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, I'm a shoe mule now.
So, so now you're the Ed Bundy is your new job. You're a shoe salesman, right?
Yeah, I have the easiest job in the world because I give them away for free with half of my job. So,
what do you like most about your job now compared to when you were fitting?
It's different. It's still the same company. It's still a Cushnet company, which I'm, very proud to be a part of. It's a significantly different job. I think the thing that I really like, and I'll speak more to the amateur side of it, the field marketing is a great thrill to see what consumers want and developing those brand ambassadors with them. And we have 4 guys in the field that do a fantastic job with it. But speaking on the amateur side, the thing I love about it is just working with the guys before they make it and seeing that development and that process of getting to the tour. You get to know them on a more personal level, and you get to really see the next up and comers, and that's just a thrill for me to be involved with that process.
Is that because you're going to a lot of the bigger amateur events, the USAM and the NCAAs and those type of things?
So this summer alone, between early June and late August, I will be going to our sales meeting, Northeast Am, Players Am, Porter Cup, possibly Western Am, USA. And so we travel all around during the summer to see the guys, and then during the school year, we'll go to all the NCAA events. During the winter, we'll go to the South Beach International Am and the Jones Cup. And so we're always just trying to keep tabs on them and taking care of the right guys and developing those relationships.
How do you determine who should be a what would you call it, ambassador for you guys? Is that the right term?
Yeah, we say a player's on support with us.
Okay, so how do you determine with all the good players? Because all of these kids and even some of the ones who are in the business world and they stayed amateur, lifelong amateur, and are still compete at a high level. How do you go about selecting who's going to be on your support roster? How do you pick them?
The junior and college criteria is different than the mid-am criteria or career am criteria for a lot of it. The mid-ams and career ams, not only do we look for good players, obviously, we have to have benchmarks because we can't be subjective in who we put on support, because if we put one guy in support and not another guy who has a better resume, that's just an unfair process, basically. But with mid-ams and career ams, we really do take into account the person, how influential they are in their area, the reputation that they have amongst golfers. We don't want to put guys on support who have, a negative reputation, where if people see him in Foot Joy product, they think, well, that guy's an asshole. I don't want to wear what he wears or use what he uses, So for mid-ams and career ams, a lot of it is the person. And that is a factor as well with the junior and college players. But with the junior and college players, it really is about rankings, Wagger rankings, Junior Golf Scoreboard, and, analyzing their game. You could find a player who maybe top 10 in his junior class, but he has the type of game that you just know is not going to translate to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not going to translate, that may outweigh his ranking. But in the end, if you're shooting good scores and you're a good player, that's going to speak volumes. And that's the number one thing we go based off of. And number two, quite honestly, is the person. As a junior and college player, are you a good person? Are you honest? Are you somebody that people respect? Do you carry yourself in the proper manner? That's something that we also take into consideration as well.
I interviewed Conrad Ray, and I asked him what he looks for in his recruiting. And he said one of the elements that they look for is kids in high school who haven't peaked yet, or who they feel haven't peaked.
Yeah.
Because they want them peaking when they get at college, or very close to. Maybe they turn pro, but they're cresting. So it sounds like you guys are taking that into account as well.
Oh, we definitely do. I mean, there's kids that we have on support that do fall within the criteria that we have set forth. But we feel, hey, boy, this kid really could turn it on based off of what we're seeing. And, based off of that, we may go a little bit heavier into supporting them in the earlier years than we otherwise would have.
Is there anyone since you've been there that you completely missed them, that you look back and say, I wish I would have signed them, or I wish I would have saw in that kid what he turned out to be?
I think that's a two-part question. There's no player, because here's the other thing too. When players turn pro, a lot of it comes down to money.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, yeah, there's a lot of players I would have loved to have signed, but fiscally it just, didn't quite fit within what we were looking to do. But honestly, I don't think I can think of a single player that just shocked me when they got to the tour. Like, wow, I did not see that coming,
or anyone that you thought, I never would have guessed he would even got to the tour, or she. Or is it nowadays that the kids are so well trained and it's like there's no way you can pick that. It's like, or is it more?
Yeah.
Wow, I really thought that kid was going to make it big time, and
I think we see that much more often than we see a guy who surprised us.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few guys, because the kids are so good now that if you stand out in college, you're probably going to make it. Now, so for that reason, there's not any kid I can think off the top of my head that I said, man, he was nothing in college and he came out to be the superstar. There have been a few kids that have not played as well as I had thought. Like, for instance, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I just read an article. Norman Jong is a perfect example. Number one amateur in the world, Walker Cup player. And he gets to the tour, and it's a struggle. It's a tough game out there to translate from college to pro, and so that's a good example right there. And that's not to say he won't make it, but he hasn't quite yet for what was billed as a can't miss coming out of college. But it's really tough. But there's been multiple kids that we thought may have done a little bit more. But here's the other thing, with golf, is that they're also 22. I mean, give them 6 years and they may be a totally different golfer. It's tough to find those Ricky Fowlers and Jordan Spieth that are just can't misses. Although it's funny that you say that, because Nick Gillum, who's the guy who had the job before myself, so between us, we've been doing this job for about 10 years, and him and I were just shooting the shit. And I said, hey, how many guys did you see in your 5 years that you said if they're not top 10 in the world, at some point in the next 5 years, you'd be surprised? And he came up with 4 names, and I came up with 2. And so that goes to show you, in 10 years, we could think of 6 guys that were so good, we actually said, I'd be surprised if they weren't top 10 in the world at some point. Yeah, so it's tough.
Who's the best player that we've never heard of?
In college or tour?
Yeah, that probably should have either gotten to the tour or been a superstar on the tour, and for whatever reason it just didn't work. That you or Nick or some of your associates would all said that this guy's going to light the world up, and then No one else ever heard of him.
Yeah, he's had a good career, and it's not to say he can't turn it around, but I'd say Patrick Rogers is probably the guy I think of right off the top of my head.
Yeah, his record in college was stellar.
No, it was unbelievable. I mean, but again, that just goes to show you that sometimes it's such a crapshoot. But yeah, he'd probably be the first guy that comes to my head that I think of. Wow, I'm a little surprised he's not quite where we thought he would be.
That he hasn't won a dozen times.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say him.
What's it like being around tomorrow's stars all the time? I mean, you're around the best amateurs in the country regularly.
Yeah. It makes you realize that if a dad comes up to you and says his 13-year-old's going to be the next superstar, you have to look at him and say, are you very sure he's going to be the next superstar? Mm-hmm. Because I just don't think people can comprehend just how good these guys are, even in college. So I'll give you a good story, kind of anecdotally. I took 3 guys out that were on support with us. And you know the names. Austin Squires, who finished semifinals at the USAM last year. Will Grimmer, who's played in dozens of USGA events, and Daniel Wederick from Ohio State. And we're standing on the 14th tee playing golf. And Daniel goes to Austin and he says, hey, you're 8 under right now for 13 holes. You got the course record in your sights. And Austin's like, gee, thanks. And he snipes it out of bounds. He snipes it out of bounds on the next shot, right? Well, Daniel decided to take over and go eagle, birdie, birdie, eagle, birdie to shoot 61, the new course record. Daniel shot 61. Austin came back and shot 64, and Will shot 65. And I came stumbling in with a 71 thinking I played great, and I got destroyed. And the thing is that you don't realize about these guys is that they are tour players. They just haven't graduated college yet. Mm-hmm. And there's hundreds of them out there. So I think that's the thing is it's almost humbling, to be honest with you.
Do you see or have you seen in all your years doing this where obviously the training level has gone to a whole new level for these kids? I mean, they've got, before they even get to college, they've got swing coaches, they've got all the TrackMan, the flight scopes, they've got everything fit. Physical trainers, some even get into their diet, even as teenagers. And that was not around 15 years ago.
Nope.
Right? So obviously everything's gotten better, but have you seen any burnout with some of these kids? That they're doing so much, so often, and they're doing it at such a high level. I mean, it's like, how long can you do that before you just fry out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question there's burnout. I think off the top of my head, there's a kid at Texas that I think that's, reached the height at 14 and, because he's around it and it's his sole focus, already you're seeing a little bit of burnout. So, absolutely there's burnout. I think what's really interesting about, the whole trainers and cookie cutter golf swing is that we just signed, 2 of the guys that we just signed out of college this past year were Braden Thornberry and Davis Riley. And you could not find 2 more different golfers. Braden Thornberry, homemade golf swing, very different, knows how to get it in the hole. Davis Riley, quite possibly the best golf swing in golf, almost. And both of them are fantastic golfers. So I think too many times people get wrapped up in, I have to get that trainer, I have to get that instructor, I have to have that perfect swing. That definitely can work, a la Davis Riley. But there's still those guys like Matthew Wolff and Braden Thornberry who have that homemade swing who just know how to get it in the hole. So, there's that balance of making sure you don't get too caught up in the fad of being perfect.
Right. I think that mindset of being perfect is dissipating, and you see that with kids like Matt Wolff. I mean,
yeah.
But when you look at him at Impact, he is perfect. He's doing exactly what he's supposed to. But that notion that you have to do it off of what textbook says, I think instruction is proving now that the old textbook is not necessarily correct.
Yeah, I almost noticed a trend back towards more
being
natural
unique.
Golf.
Yes.
Yeah, more natural golf. I feel like 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was do this, and this is how you be good. Whereas now I'm definitely noticing a trend back towards more natural and unique swings, learning how to get done. I mean, there's a kid who's at Georgia Southern, unfortunately can't talk names just simply because he's not pro yet, very unorthodox golf swing, and quite frankly could be one of the best iron players I've seen since I've been doing this job, you know?
Right.
So it really is all about just knowing your swing and knowing what to do.
What is it, or can you speak to it when somebody's on support with Foot Joy and Titleist? What is it that you guys do for the kids or the amateurs or whoever the person may be?
Yeah, so the USGA back in the early 2000s did allow manufacturers to start taking care of amateurs with product support. And the reason it's not considered gifts is because we are actually providing product to be used in tournaments and in play. We're not just simply giving gifts out. We're actually using this product is to be used in tournaments and practice. When it comes to the NCAA, we do have to ship everything to the coach in order to make sure that the coach is the one responsible for handing it to the players. So for college players, we can't hand it directly to the players, all the product. But basically what it entails is shoe support, give them shoes for the year, glove support, and ball support. That's our first level. If you reach another level and achieve certain objectives and rankings, then you get put on FPL support, so you get club support. And then a very select few of individuals get apparel support, FootJoy apparel support through us. So basically, like I said, it's supplying the product that they need to play in the events and accomplish their goals.
How do you get around? So let's say that you got a kid and he's at the level 2. So he's got balls, gloves, shoes, and clubs. And you know, you send it to him in April, and come June, when the summer for most of these kids kick in, he shows up and he's got his clubs, but he's wearing a competitor's shoes. How do you deal with that?
You know, obviously we cannot sign anybody to contracts. There's no contractual obligation to play our stuff. We just can't do it because they're amateurs. It really depends on the player, but honestly, it's about creating trust. And if you see that going up to the player and just saying, hey, you know, first of all, I would have liked a little bit of communication to give me some fair warning that you were not going to be using our stuff. Until you just got to be honest with us. You know, you got to say, hey, there is an expectation that the product that we provide is going to be used in these events, because we're not doing this for our health. You know, we're doing this to create a relationship with you, to achieve your goals. And if a player gets it, great. You know, maybe they make the switch back and you move on. Or if they're completely honest and say, hey, I want to go with this other company, you respectfully say, I understand, and you kind of go your separate ways. But that's why honesty and loyalty is just so important in what we do, because you just got to trust that the players are going to use the stuff that we give them.
Yeah, and if they don't, you just chalk it up as a loss?
It depends. I think if the player was maybe a little misguided or naive, I think we're much more open to having the conversation with them, making sure that they completely understand our expectations so we're not totally shut off. If we find out that the player, and there are guys like this and quite frankly families like this that are just playing the game, quite honestly, then I can, we typically just say, okay, we're going to move our separate ways, best of luck, and just kind of move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you do? Otherwise, they're just going to try to bleed you for everything they can. That doesn't
exactly.
It doesn't shed you. It doesn't. They're not at that point. They're not representing your brand. They're actually dragging it down.
Exactly. And, you know, we're also in a very fortunate position between Titleist and FootJoy that we have more than enough people that want to be with us, that the last thing I'm going to do is try to take care of a kid who's taken advantage of a program like ours and sacrificing a kid who wouldn't do that, who would show the loyalty and honesty that we expect and that we give them as well.
Is that business somewhat cutthroat where you look, some things that your contemporaries or some of your competitors do, you just look at them and shake your head in amazement? Or is it,
Yes.
or is it what you would hope, that everyone kind of okay, I respect it. These kids are with Bubba and Foot Joy, and I'm not going to try to invade that.
You know, that's a good question. It's pretty cutthroat. It really is. You know, I mean, Nike's made very big inroads with a lot of the NCAA teams through the athletic departments.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been something that we've been battling. But you know, while there is that, I think the club side sees it a little bit more than I do. Quite frankly, as far as other companies trying to poach certain players. But you know, one thing I'll say from a Titleist and FootJoy perspective is we're very respectful. If there's a kid who is let's say a diehard TaylorMade Nike player, we're pretty much just going to understand, hey, that's your relationship. We understand it. We'll respect that. And for the most part, Nike and Adidas are pretty good at that as well. I can't speak as much to the club side because I think there's a lot more variables on that side, to be honest with you. But it's very cutthroat. I mean, it is. The kids keep getting younger and younger that we put on support, and there's that balance of how young do you go? How good do you really know a 12-year-old is going to be in 8 years?
Right.
You know, how good do you know? I mean, I can't tell you some sophomores in college who I know are going to make it, let alone a 12-year-old. So I think that's where it's starting to get a little more dicey, is that it's almost a race to I don't want to say a race to the bottom, but a race to younger. And that's one that I personally, from a FootJoy perspective, try to stay away from. Because, you know, then you're taking care of a kid that maybe just matured earlier and looks to be a superstar compared to kids who haven't matured. Or, you know, then, you know, there's just so many variables that can happen in 8-9 years that you just don't know. So I personally like to wait until they get a little bit older and I have a little better idea of what they really will be. But it's extremely cutthroat out there.
I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting. But you know, I will say this: every company is, for the most part, very respectful of each other. Let's put it like this: there's no fist fights happening on the first tee between Nike and FootJoy or TaylorMade and Titleist, you know, over a player or anything like that. So
how do you go? So take us through. So you're out there and do you follow? So you're going to the bigger events, the USAM, the Players Am. They still have the Western up at Point.
Oh yeah, Western's huge. Yeah, Western's probably the second best amateur event in the country.
All right, then they still have the North South and
oh yeah,
what's the one up in Philadelphia? The old one. I can't.
I think it was the Northeast in Providence.
The Northeast. Yep.
Yeah, I was just there last week.
So you're going to a lot of these, but you got to. How do you keep an eye on who the junior kids are who are coming up? Because obviously a 14, 15-year-old kid is probably not getting into the Rice Planners or the Players Am or the some of these invitationals that are old prestigious tournaments. So do you guys do you go to a lot of the AJGA stuff, or do you all these other younger, or where all these young kids play, or do you just kind of watch it through the ranking?
Well, I'm very fortunate. So I'm the only guy on FootJoy who handles what I do. Titleist has a much larger staff.
Mm-hmm.
They have, between club and ball shoe glove reps, they have a good 8-9 individuals who, you know, do the junior college program. And Titleist and myself, through Jim Ahern, who oversees that program, have such a good working relationship that we kind of came to an agreement that while I take care of a lot of the juniors on apparel support, all of those individuals, when it comes to the vast majority of ball shoe glove or FPL juniors, the Titleist team helps me out significantly with that because I can't be everywhere. I just can't. And so my focus, my main focus is junior apparel players, all college players, and mid-ams. And so what we do is we do look at rankings to kind of say, okay, these individuals fall within our criteria, and this is who we like to take a look at. And then we go to these events to actually see the players, get to meet them, see what they're like, see what their game is like, see what their family is like, quite honestly. And then those two things combined help us make a determination as to product support moving forward, et cetera. With my job, yes, I'm always trying to find that next guy But quite honestly, from a FootJoy perspective, because unlike the club fitters, you have to go out and make sure that the irons are up to date. If there's any issues with the driver or the wedges, or, there's always something to work on. With FootJoy, once I give them their clock, they're pretty much set. So when I go to an event like the Northeast Am or the USAM or the Western, I'm pretty much there just to hang out with the guys, watch their game, make sure that they're still playing well, analyze that, but really just develop that relationship on a deeper level.
So because you're on the apparel side, and the apparel is like the third tier, the highest tier someone get to, you're really utilizing the Titleist guys to, hey, here's a kid that's level 2. We think he can get to level 3. Keep an eye on him.
Exactly. And usually if you get to that FPL level, I'm pretty aware of you. And so that's when the Titleist side and I will determine further support moving forward. It's really the ball, shoe, glove guys that I do know, and I do know well a lot of them, but there's a lot I don't. And that's where I rely a lot on the Titleist guys who are out there, have a wider net, and are just such a tremendous help for me getting to know these kids that I might otherwise not see. Because I go to a lot of events with the Titleist guys, and they know these players very well because I haven't seen them, and they'll just introduce me to them, and that's my chance to get to meet them. And so we already have that existing relationship because they know that, hey, if this individual from Titleist is talking to me, if I need something from FootJoy, he's going to be able to help me out, and vice versa. If I see Bubba and I need a last-minute Titleist thing, he knows where to go and how to help him out. So we're a very close team that represents the entire Acushnet brand.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty good.
It's helpful. Yeah, it's helpful, and it's needed, quite frankly. So it works out well.
Cool. All right, let's move out of that. Let's go into just some stuff about you and hodgepodge of different questions.
Yeah.
So you've been in the golf industry for quite some time. We just established all that. What were you certain about, let's say, 15, 20 years ago that today you think completely different about?
With relation to golf or just me personally?
In relation to golf. So when you were, let's say you were coming out of college or playing mini tours, that you were certain in golf, whether it was your swing, your game, or just the overall industry in general, you were certain about it. But now that you've been in it in a wide array of disciplines, so to speak, you're like, nope, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Now I see it 180 degree different.
Yeah, that's a good question. All right, I got a good one for you. The influence of professional golfers on consumer buying trends.
How so?
I was convinced that 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when Tiger was doing what he was doing, and those guys, that because a tour player is playing something, that product will sell. And being in the golf industry now, I've come to realize that there is little to no correlation between a specific player and the success of sales.
Do you think that that's changed over the years? Because, I mean, Tiger basically built Nike's Golf Pro. He is Nike Golf.
Yeah, and where's their hard good coming?
Right. You're absolutely right.
And that's why I think for Acushnet, it's so important that we continue to stress the fact that, yeah, we have very noticeable players in our stuff. Adam Scott in Foot Joy and Titleist clubs, and Patrick Cantlay and Jordan Spieth for Titleist. It's very important to have that. But what's more important is we are number one. We're the most used shoe. We're the most used glove. We're the most used ball. We're now the most used driver, the most used iron, the most used wedges. It's the plurality play that really does sell. It's not one golfer,
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think, if Tiger's using it or so-and-so is using it, done. That's going to sell like hotcakes. And there's just no correlation between a player using something and sales. Now, does that mean it doesn't help? No. I mean, certainly if there could be a small spike, there could be, like Freddie Couples with the Echo shoe back in the Masters, 10 years ago. There's a small spike. But again, where's Echo now, as far as golf shoes? So I think that was the number one thing I've done a complete 180 on since being involved with the golf industry.
Well, I think you're right. And the whole industry as a whole, I think that's why you're seeing even the tour pros. There is no that some people say there's no more brand loyalty. I say I call BS on that. It's that you'll have a guy who'll play a certain set of irons and he'll play a certain driver, he'll play certain wedges, certain balls, shoes, and then he'll get a corporate sponsor for his bag.
Yep.
So I think that it's happened on both sides, as you said.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No question. I mean, look at Brooks Koepka.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he doesn't have a single club deal. And he's using a hodgepodge. But again, it hasn't resulted in, it hasn't resulted in extra sales of Mizuno irons, or whatever it may be that he's using. I think that's been a very telling thing that I've learned in the golf industry is that one player does not make a brand. It's too hard because, if the player's not playing that week or if he has a down year, whatever it may be, it's really tough to build a brand on one player.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely one thing for sure. And then I'd say the other one that's really big, and I don't mean this as a negative to consumers by any means, but the amount of misinformation that consumers are willing to believe. And I think that's the case with a lot of industries. But the problem with golf is that when you're buying golf equipment, it's going to affect how you play. And whether it's fitting for golf balls or fitting for clubs, or hell, even knowing the right size shoe. Consumer knowledge is not what I thought it should be or thought it would be. And that's one thing we're working very hard on.
How do you change that? Is it through a website? Is it through
I think that's the other thing that's changed significantly in the last 10 years is the ability for us to directly communicate with the consumers through social media, website, or even what we're doing on the field marketing program, where they see upwards of 4,000 golfers in person. It's so much. The days of print media and commercials are dying, not so much because they're not important, but because there's so much more impact to directly talk to a company, whether it's through social media, through forums, through blogs, through the website, through outreach like what we're doing with the field marketing program, that's the way to really educate people. So, because what can you learn about club fitting in a 30-second commercial during the U.S. Open?
Right.
You're not going to learn what exactly is right for you. You're going to learn it by talking to a knowledgeable representative who is right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the two biggest things I've noticed in the golf industry.
What advice would you give some young kids or amateurs today that wanted to get on the Foot Joy support program?
Play good.
To win. It usually solves a lot of problems.
Win, be good at golf. That's number one. If you play well, it's going to happen. If you're going to be, playing a lot of events, play well is number one. And number two, the other recommendation I have is if you're a kid who is a good golfer, does warrant receiving product support from a company, be loyal to that company. Develop the relationships, get to know the people, and don't play the game. That's my number one thing.
Yeah, it always comes down to relationships, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. I mean, it's hammered home by some of the elder statesmen in our company, and I used to kind of roll my eyes at it, but now it's so true, is that we're a people and product-driven company. People number one, product number two, because if you don't have that relationship, what good is having good product?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so,
you got to be people-oriented in any business or in anything that you do if you want to be successful.
100%. 100%.
What's the best advice you were ever given?
I've ever given?
That you were ever given?
Ever? Like just in general?
Mm-hmm.
Just be honest with people, and sometimes that means telling them the hard thing. I think too many people nowadays don't want to have that hard conversation, and it leads to bigger issues when you're not just honest with people. Now, it doesn't have to be mean. I think a lot of times people now construe honesty with being mean. I have to have a lot of hard conversations with players on a weekly basis that, hey, you don't qualify for support. or hey, your game is struggling and there's other players that we might have to put on support other than you. And instead of avoiding that hard conversation, which seems easier but makes it more difficult down the road, you just got to be honest with people and upfront. So I think that's the number one piece of advice I've been given.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost one question I usually ask is failure a good thing? And I interviewed Randy Sohm, was a president of Johnson Controls, and he answered immediately. He said, not only is it a good thing, but it's a necessary thing.
Yeah.
So if you're telling a kid, look, your game's not up to par, we're going to have to take you off support, that could be the best thing that ever happens to that kid, because now he gets his focus back. Maybe he was neglecting practice or thought he achieved, and now he can take some tournaments off and he doesn't have to do as much. And maybe now that's the kick in the butt that he needs.
Yeah.
Because he failed, and now it gets him back on track, and he goes to the next level. He wins NCAAs or he wins AM or whatever it is. He gets through Q school, but he relies on that he doesn't want to go through that again.
Oh, 100%. Like you said, it's that kick in the butt sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's necessary.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. So yeah, I think that's definitely the best piece of advice I've been given. Like, nobody wants to give bad news. Everybody wants to give good news.
Right.
It's a lot more fun for me to tell a player they've been added to support than for me to tell a player they've been taken off support.
What? So, someone that's either coming out of college, they want to get into the golf business, or they took their shot at the mini tour and didn't make it, and they look at you and I was like, man, Bubba's got this awesome job, but I can't even fathom how to get there. What would you tell them to do? What advice would you give them to go from where they are to get to a level that you're at?
I think the number one thing to remember, I can only speak to a Acushnet company. I can't speak to other companies, obviously, but I think the number one thing to remember is that I see a lot of kids that I interview, whether it's for the field marketing position or even other positions I've interviewed for, and the number one thing they want to say is, I want to work on tour, especially the players who tried to do mini tour or played in college and realized it didn't work. I want to be a tour ready, or I want to be, I want to have your job. And it sounds cliche, but the thing they need to understand is being a part of the leadership team in Titleist and Foot Joy, as with most companies, is probably the hardest division to get into in any company, golf company. And you don't just jump into it. You just don't. You have to be willing to get to know the company, know the culture, know the brand, know what we're about, before you could ever dream of just jumping right into being a tour rep or even one of the college reps. And so for that, as much as it may suck, you just got to get into the door, and then from there, you prove your worth, you prove your knowledge, you prove your work ethic, and doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I can certainly tell you it's not going to happen on a million. So I think that's my number one piece of advice, is to have realistic expectations as to how soon you can get that dream job that you want. So,
yeah, I forget who said it, but most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5 to 10.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. That's actually a great way to put it, because here's the other thing too, is I'll ask those individuals, I say, okay, you want to be on the tour now, let's say, right? Well, what do you want to do in 10 years? You still want to be on the tour? And then if they say yes, I say, are you sure? Because you've never spent one day out on the tour, working it. Are you sure that's what you want to do in 10 years? Because if you get involved with a company in another job, you may realize, yeah, I do want to be on the tour for 20 years and work that job. Or you may say, wow, I really don't. But the thing is that those tour jobs or jobs like mine, you can't have somebody coming in every year because it's such a relationship job.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have somebody here for multiple years. So like you said, I think they overestimate what they want to do in 1 year and then underestimate what they want to do in 5 to 10. And it's just important to get to know the company, know the culture, know what we're about. And from there, you can then work your way up.
Well,
I've had a lot of people, quite honestly, when they hear that, say, no, that's not for me. Then so be it. It's better to find out sooner than later.
Well, I think the other thing is that they don't even realize, or maybe they can't fathom, is if you're going to be at the elite amateur level, or if you're going to be at the at the tour level in the van or doing something. You cannot make a mistake. I mean, you maybe a very small one, but when you make a mistake at that level on somebody's clubs or their equipment or something else, that is huge to their career and their livelihood.
Oh, 100%.
So this isn't like you're going to go to the tour van or to an amateur circuit and learn baptism by fire. That's not how it works, because the consequences are way too, the stakes are way too high.
100%. Yeah, you're dealing with somebody's livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No, you hit it right on the head.
I don't think a lot of those people understand that.
No, we can't just, you can't just get thrown out into the fire and learn out there. We got to know that you're the right person for the job and you're the right person for that organization and that team. And a lot of people also don't realize how hard it is. It's grind. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It may seem fun traveling the tour, and it is a great job and a great group of people that we have out there. But also, are you also sure, especially if you have a family, that you want to be on the road 3 to 4 days a week for 35 weeks in the year?
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's the other thing you got to consider. So there's a lot of factors that go into it that you have to consider, and I think it's something that people just don't realize when they see it on TV or they hear about it on the website, and they think, oh, that's for me. That's what I want to do. And turns out that, there's something totally different out there.
Mm-hmm. Reality hits him upside the head.
Yeah, exactly. I always like to say the grass is greener on the other side. So it is very, very hard.
Well,
so,
people used to say the same thing when they say, well, you meet somebody, well, what do you do? And I'm a professional golfer. Oh, that must be awesome. I think, well, yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
Or it can be very, very dark, because if you're 2,000 miles from anybody you know and you're playing awful and you missed 3-4 cuts in a row, and you're staring at another hotel ceiling, and it's like, this is terrible. But if you're playing and making cuts and hanging out and winning and making money, and you're growing, you're saying, oh man, I get one more thing, and I'm going to the web or whatever that, I don't know the new name of the tour is, or I'm playing good going into Q school or whatever it is. Okay, yeah, it's really good, but it does have there are two sides of that coin that a lot of people don't realize.
Absolutely, there's no question. I mean, it's hard out there.
Mm-hmm. Even on the big tour, you're playing for your livelihood. Of course, they're playing for a lot of money, but you've got to make a lot to stay there.
Absolutely, that's the thing with the big tour. You don't make a cut, you're not making any of that big money.
Yeah, and you got big expenses.
Exactly. That's the other thing too. It's not cheap traveling the tour.
No.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and I think a lot of people are just. I hate to use the word naive, because I don't think everybody's naive, but I think there's a lot of misinformation as to what it's really like.
Well, plus they see TV, right? And it even on the teaching side, when I teach, it's like, oh, these guys are so good. Like, okay, how many of the guys that you saw last week, the top 5, go watch them this week, and some of them aren't even making the cut.
Yeah,
you're just seeing the guys and the girls every week who are they're on TV because they're playing well. And it's very rarely the same people. Tiger, Phil, Koepka, DJ. Speed. Those guys are the top 0.5%. So yes, they're going to be there. But let's talk about the whole. Even at the most elite level of the PGA or LPGA, you're only seeing the select few on TV who are leading. You're not seeing the people struggling to make the cut.
Yeah, 100%. Yep, absolutely. You're only seeing the guys playing well.
So it's their idea and their perception is just based off what they're seeing, but they're not seeing the whole picture.
Yep, absolutely. And it's hard to see that too sometimes. People want to see what they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
What they want to believe. But it's a different game when you actually get out there.
Yep.
But yeah, but it is fun. It's a good group of guys, and it's fun to see these guys coming up and getting to know them on a more personal level and everything. So it's fun.
Let's do some little rapid fire. I've eaten up a lot of your time. I know you got a family and probably work to do.
No, we won't talk about all the work that I'm missing. So.
you can tell your supervisor that, hey, I'm getting some airtime, so it's work anyway.
Exactly.
If you would not have gone into golf, you would have been a blank.
Marketing in some aspect with a consumer product goods company.
Cool. Your dream foursome.
I would have to say my dream foursome would consist of the three guys that I just love playing golf with, which would be Alex, the guy who used to work with the Manchester Lane, and then my two good friends from Florida, Chris and Nate.
I'm sure you guys would have a hell of a time, and I know Alex.
Well, there was always a great game that we had going on, and I tell you, it's like, yeah, your dream foursome maybe somebody you don't know but who's famous, and that'd be fun too. But man, there's just nothing better than standing on that first tee with three guys that you just love spending 5 hours with and playing good golf with. That to me is a blast.
Well, yeah, and you know with your certain group that no matter when you get together or how old you are, that something there is some great memory is going to be made somehow, way, shape, or form.
Exactly. And the absolute best part is no strokes have to be given because everybody's playing zero. I hate giving strokes. Only golf can somebody not as good at the game claim that they beat you because you had to give them these magical strokes. It's like LeBron playing a guy who LeBron has to play on a 10-foot net and the other guy has to play on a 7-foot net, Like, wait a second. Nothing drives me more nuts than when a guy with a handicap claims he beat me, even though score-wise,
you thumped
he didn't beat me. Yeah, so.
Let's see. Walking or riding? Also translate to caddy or cart.
I used to be walking, but I'm a riding guy now. I hate to say it.
That's because all the paraphernalia you bring along now.
Yeah, exactly. What about you?
I like to walk, but now that I'm getting up in age, I think my caddy would look like a camel with the with the speakers. The Bose speaker I got to bring, and then the cigars, case of cigars, and then the I'm not going to say what beverages, but yeah, caddy looks at me and he said, "I'm not a camel. Go get a cart."
Yeah, I got to be honest. I think I'm a cart guy now.
I've segued there. When I'm playing days, that was strictly no. We're walking.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Walking with a caddy is pretty tough to beat.
But back then I couldn't. If somebody had music on while we were playing, I wanted to kill them. Because you're going from playing for your livelihood, and you're serious all the time. And even if you come home, and you're playing with the guys. You're playing for something, and you're laughing and cutting up a little bit. But you're also serious when you're hitting your shots. When people started bringing Pandora and their music and all this other, I want to put a club right through the speaker. But now it's been so long since I played competitively, I don't think I can play without the music and the cigars and the drink here and there.
I completely agree. I'm totally with you. Although the only way I differ, I'm totally in on the music and the cigars. I actually still don't drink when I'm playing golf. Believe it or not. I don't know what it is. For whatever reason, I just feel like if I'm playing golf, I still want to play well, and then I'll have 20 drinks after the round.
Well, most of my golf's now limited to member guests, so that's usually where the alcohol comes in.
Yeah, you have no choice. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Let's see what else I got here. Your three bucket list courses.
So ones I haven't played.
Yes.
All right. Number one's Augusta for sure. Boy, I've heard Royal County Down is about as good as it gets, so I'll put Royal County Down there, and then. Let's say, oh boy, I'm thinking too much on this. I'm trying to think. I'll say the golf or National Golf.
Yeah, those are three. You got three pretty good ones there.
Yeah, those are the three that I would say are the top ones.
All right. Who's the GOAT, Tiger or Jack?
Tiger.
Fair enough.
What about you?
I think Tiger can get there. I haven't given it to him yet.
I know it's so hard to say that considering he hasn't won the same amount of majors, but I say this. Tiger has done things to fields and a golf ball that Jack never did.
Right.
And that's why I have to kind of put him number one. But, I mean, trust me, I'm not going to say if somebody says Jack is number one that they're, wrong. But I just think what Tiger can do with a golf ball, especially in his prime, just Jack even wasn't able to do.
I might get beat up for saying this on the comments and the social media and stuff, but I do agree with Brandel's assessment of this, in that Tiger had the best period in golf in history.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, what he did in 2000 wasn't human.
Right. And he will surpass Jack if he gets to the major number, but I'm not ready to give it to him yet.
I get it. I mean, that's what makes the argument something that you can actually have.
Yeah, it's a compelling argument.
He doesn't have the majors. And I'm also not one to say, oh, but if he, didn't, go around sleeping with 3,000 women and, get a club thrown through his car, he would have done it, because guess what? It did happen, and you can't just say, oh, he would have had 8 more majors now. Yeah, and he might have, but he doesn't. I'm not one for that, though.
No, because you could make the equal argument, as has been made on the Golf Channel. Some say, well, if he didn't change his swing 3 times, he would have done it. Well, maybe. Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe he would have had a big issue and he couldn't overcome it. I mean, who knows? I mean, the guy's a phenomenal golfer. It is what it is. He's a great golfer. He's up there as one of the best ever, if not the best. And
yeah.
I've told people, like the LeBron and Jordan argument, and then years ago it was the Jordan versus Wilt argument. When it comes to a point that there is no argument, then that person has superseded the predecessor, but they usually have to do more than the predecessor did to reach that, to convince everybody.
I think that's a fair argument. Yeah.
And that's probably a little unfair to that person.
Yeah, I agree. But hey, if you want to be considered the consensus number one.
Yeah, you're talking about the greatest ever. So yeah, you're gonna have to do something that nobody else has done to take that medal. Yeah. Let's see, where are we? Okay. If you could win any golf tournament in the world, any one, which would it be?
Masters.
All right.
100%.
Cavity back or blade?
Boy, I used to be blade, now I'm cavity back because I'm getting older.
Everyone who's over the age of, let's say, 35, let's say cavity back.
I have a feeling your answer is probably pretty similar.
Yep, I think, I have transitioned. It needs to look like a blade, but I enjoy the cavity back.
Yeah, I got a quick funny story about that. I was a couple years ago, I had played a mixed set of CB and MBs. And I was sitting down with our club rep, and he's like, all right, hey, you got to get your club order in. What do you want? This is when the AP2s came out 2 years ago, 718s. I said, oh, I'll just use my usual CB-MB combo. And he looks at me, and he goes, Bubba, you're a good golfer. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And he goes, but you're not as good as Will Zalatoris and Braden Thornberry. And I go, no, I know I'm not. He goes, they use AP2s. And I go, all right, send me AP2s, and I never look back. So...
yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard to give up on that. That you need the help.
They just look so good.
Let's best golf course you ever played.
That's 2 different questions. The best course I've ever played is Pine Valley. My favorite course I've ever played is Oak Hill.
Oakland Hills or Oak Hill?
Oak Hill in Rochester.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
That's a tough one to beat because I would rather play Oak Hill every day.
All right. If you could change one rule in golf, which one would it be?
Being able to move it from the divot in the fairway.
I didn't even know you could do that.
No, I'm saying you should be able to.
You should. Okay.
If you hit a fairway, you should not be penalized by being in a divot.
Yeah, the rubber, the green kind of kicks you in the gut right there.
I know the argument that it's a little ambiguous as to, what's a divot? Is it old? Is it repaired? Is it sand filled? I don't care. I almost am so extreme to say, screw it, roll it in the fairway no matter what. I mean, if you hit a fairway, you should not be penalized in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. What about you?
Probably the new drop rule. It's awful.
Yeah, well, that just looks so dumb.
It just looks dumb.
Yeah,
I understand they're trying to speed up play. It was like, come on, you got to come up with something better than that.
Yeah.
All right, last one. What's in your opinion the best golf ball that was ever made?
Best golf ball?
Yes. And I know you're partial to Titleist, but so we'll narrow that one down to Titleist. But which ball in the Titleist brand throughout history, in your opinion, is the best?
2011 Pro V1X. 2011 Pro V1X flew high and just went a country mile for my launch conditions. So I would say 2011 Pro V1X.
You know what mine is?
What?
Like the late 80s, the Titleist DT that had the small DT above the Titleist.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And for a high school kid who didn't have much money, those were relatively inexpensive. They lasted forever. They went far. They had enough spin. It was like back then the perfect ball. I mean, you only used Bellata if you were in a big junior tournament.
Yes, exactly.
But for high school play, that ball was awesome.
I was close to saying the professional 90s because for Christmas every year I get 3 dozen and think, I treat those things like gold.
Mm-hmm.
So from a nostalgia standpoint, I'll say that. But from an actual best golf ball I've ever played, 2011 Pro V1X.
Cool. Hey, this has been awesome, brother. I appreciate it.
It's been a great time.
I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of info about golf balls and amateur golf and everything else just based off what we talked about today.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for everything that you do, and we'll be in touch.
All right. You have a great one. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.